Like all good shows, the finale is usually where you get the most action, the most bang for your buck, and that's where we're sitting right now in the transfer portal. Welcome into the Hard Count. This is the People's College Football Show. It is Tuesday, April 30th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. I'll tell you what, man, as we were preparing for this show, we actually had to cut like 2 or 3 segments because we would have gone for like 2 hours. So don't let anybody tell you that college football ever stops. It doesn't stop on this show, and we're going to fill an hour full worth in the month of April. Who would have thought? We got transfer portal latest. We got Portal Pete Nakos joining the show here in a matter of 20, 15 minutes or so. He's going to join us and talk about the latest from the transfer portal, what he's hearing. He just put out an intel piece on on3.com, so go and check that out. Also, if you know Portal Pete, you know that he specializes in the portal, but also, man, Transfer Portal Pete, he can pretty much talk anything under the sun. So we'll get his thoughts on this new deal with the revenue sharing rumblings that are about to gain some more momentum, it seems like. Also got some thoughts from him on the latest from EA Sports, because they put out a little leak, if you will. There was some news that came out yesterday around the potential cover for that College Football 25 video game that we're all preparing to take some PTO for. Also, Nebraska, if you guys watched that spring game from this past weekend, you saw Dylan Raiola just dime dropping like it was his job. He changes Nebraska in 2024. Nebraska fans, I know that you are trying to hold that optimism very loosely because you've had optimism the last couple of seasons, and every single season you're just let down. Barely missed in a bowl game. 1-score loss after 1-score loss. Dylan Raiola, I think, changes the ceiling, and I think he changes your outlook in 2024. Speaking of the portal, man, Miami, they have been portaling like a program. Got a smooth 4 commitments in 2 days over the weekend. Why are they doing it? How are they doing it? We'll unpack that together here in just a matter of moments. In addition to that, we got some spring game takeaways from Colorado, spring game takeaways from what went down at Oregon. We got a lot to talk about. So lock in, make sure you're subscribed. College football does not stop. A lot of y'all, for the majority of your life, have been watching full game reruns on YouTube to try and get your college football fix. We still endorse that. Heck, we still do that on this very show, actually. However, you don't need to rely solely on that. You can also have shows like this that talk college football year-round, so make sure you're subscribed. If you're a college football sicko, we salute you. We're one and the same. Welcome home. Let's get right to it, man. The transfer portal finale, if you will, is upon us. Today, Tuesday, April 30th, 2024, as of 11:59 p.m., that is the last chance you have if you want to transfer, graduate or otherwise, to submit your paperwork. Now, it's worth noting, you do not have to commit prior to this deadline, so you can just jump in there and hang out for a while before you have to make a decision. Also worth noting, a guy might submit his paperwork at 11:58, 11:59, and his name may not pop up in the portal until 48 hours after that. So don't be surprised if we see some names pop up on Thursday and we thought we were out of the woods with the portal. No. Compliance, I believe, has 48 hours to get their players into the portal officially. So with that being said, what's the latest movement? Well, over the weekend, Dylan Edwards, running back from Colorado, transferred or committed to transfer to Kansas State. This is a big get for the folks out there in the Little Apple in Manhattan, Kansas. This is a dude who was committed to you out of high school. This is a dude who is from the state of Kansas, averaged 5.5 yards a touch at Colorado a season ago. He was a weapon in the pass game, catching 36 passes. I cannot wait to watch Avery Johnson, a former youth football teammate of Dylan Edwards, worth mentioning. I cannot wait to watch them run the read option together. Because when defenses have to key on Dylan Edwards and then also worry about the legs of Avery Johnson, it's just going to be so dynamic. If nothing else, when we get the College Football 25 video game, that's going to be unstoppable, I promise you. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch that out there in Manhattan, Kansas this upcoming season. I alluded to Miami at the top of this live show. We're going to talk about them a little bit more later in this show, but they got 2 big fish offensively. Damian Martinez, the top player in the transfer portal, running back from Oregon State, ran for over 2,000 yards his 2 years in Corvallis, and wide receiver Sam Brown from Houston. We'll start with Martinez. He changes the game plan that defenses have to utilize when they play against Miami. It used to be, or your thought used to be, I would have to imagine, if you were a defense prepping for the Canes, it was, okay, well, they got Cam Ward, so we're going to really make sure that we key on the pass. Well, you can't do that anymore with Damian Martinez. The way that he runs the football, the way that he gets north and south, he's going to demand attention in the box. So the bottom line here is you make your offense more balanced, and you have, I think, more opportunities to fight different styles offensively. If you want to compete for the highest prizes in college football, whether it be conference titles or college football playoff berths or even national championships, you have to be able to win ugly at some point, whether it's bad weather, whether your quarterback has an off day. You have to be able to run the football. Adding Damian Martinez into that lineup, going to help with that effort. Speaking of Sam Brown, though, the wide receiver they got from Houston, he is the kind of weapon I think this offense was missing. Like, he's that key ingredient you were hoping to land through the portal. He transfers from Houston, as I mentioned, 62 catches for 800-plus yards a season ago. The thing I love about him, he's explosive. He's the kind of guy that can take the top off a defense, can keep that safety playing a little bit deeper than maybe he typically would if Sam Brown weren't on the roster for Miami. He averaged 13 yards a reception last year. For context, Miami averaged 7.5 yards a pass last season. You change the quarterback, you add some weapons. I think you're going to see a little bit more explosivity in Coral Gables this upcoming season. So 2 big gets for them offensively. And that was not all they did this past weekend, just so we're on the same page. But those are the 2 that I want to make sure we highlight. So we had some commitments. We also had some names pop up here towards the finish line of this transfer portal season. Peyton Woodyard is a name that you probably know if you follow recruiting, because he was a 4-star safety at a St. John Bosco High School in Southern California who committed to Alabama. Now, he committed to Nick Saban's Alabama. Nick Saban retires. Peyton Woodyard goes through spring football, receives an award for being one of the most improved freshmen from spring football, so hat tip to him. He is now back in the portal. We're going to get some more intel from Pete Nakos when he joins the show here in just a little bit, but it's worth noting. Peyton Woodyard flipped his commitment from Georgia to Alabama during his recruitment. So I think conventional wisdom, you go, okay, well, is he going to go to Georgia? I suppose he could, but remember, per SEC rules, he cannot transfer to an SEC school and be eligible immediately. So that feels like it's a bit of a long shot, if you ask me. The school that we are hearing rumblings about the most is Oregon. That would make a lot of sense. Get back to the West Coast. You're closer to home. You're also more than likely able to compete a little bit earlier for some playing time. So we'll see what happens there, but that would make a whole lot of sense. Peyton Woodyard, high-profile recruit from the 2024 class, is back on the market. We'll see where he ends up. Speaking of high-profile recruits, Cormani McClain was a 5-star when he came out of high school. Cormani McClain at one point in time was fielding offers from SEC schools. He was committed to Miami. He ends up flipping at the last minute and going out to Colorado. Now he's back in the portal, and he doesn't have the same amount of suitors as he had at one point in time. There's no real news for Cormani McClain when it comes to schools in the mix. Utah was mentioned to Steve Wiltfong, but as Pete Nakos reported, they don't have a scholarship right now, so I don't know how that would work. But the thing that I think we got to watch here most closely, again, the relational aspect for Cormani McClain, USF, I think is still that school that would make the most sense. You're with someone who you recruited, or who recruited you rather, to Miami, and DeMarcus Van Dyke, who's now coaching DBs out there at USF. Worth noting, he recently signed NIL representation. So how that impacts his recruitment, we're going to find out. But Cormani McClain, at this point, no news is bad news. Like, the options, you have to believe, for the players in the portal right now, you probably have a good gauge as to what they were when you jumped in there. And as you get further and further into this process, I suppose that some spots could become available as certain schools lose guys at the last minute, but I have to believe, like, you kind of know what you're dealing with right now if you're Cormani McClain in terms of what schools you can pick from. So we'll ask Pete Nakos a little bit more about him when he joins the show in a minute, but the latest with him is he has signed NIL representation, and we'll see what happens there. Quick check-in on the 2, in my opinion, most valuable players in the transfer portal right now, and that is the dynamic duo of Michigan State defensive lineman Simeon Barrow, who is 6'3", 290 pounds, and Derek Harmon, who is 6'5", 320 pounds. Dudes like that do not grow on trees, transfer portal or otherwise, so they're obviously hot commodities. Simeon Barrow visited Miami, also visited LSU and Missouri. I think he is more important, in my opinion, to Miami. He has that missing piece feel to me. If he were to go to Coral Gables and help be a presence in the middle of that defense, LSU, if he were to go there, he would kind of be a piece that you're helping restock the cupboard for them. It's no secret they were very, very bad last year defensively, were the Tigers, kind of trying to recapture that spirit of what they are defensively under new management out there with Blake Baker running the show. have to believe it wouldn't hurt adding a Simeon Barrow. So those are the three that we're watching right now for him. Miami, LSU, and then Missouri, as I mentioned, also got a visit. For Derek Harmon, he originally was going to visit Miami. He visited USC. He visited Colorado. He said, you know what, actually, I'm good on that visit to Miami. So take of that as you will. From where I'm sitting, if you liked your visit to Colorado or you liked your visit to USC and you feel good enough about those options to where you don't need to go see somewhere else, I feel like that probably bodes well for both of those schools. The Colorado spring game, it sounded like was just a movie with Ryan Garcia there, Lil Wayne there. Like, I'm just saying, nobody does visits like Colorado when it comes to getting them on campus. Don't think that hurt things. Also worth noting, Derek Harmon is no stranger to the portal. He jumped in the portal last winter, or this most recent cycle, I suppose. So this most recent winter. Bottom line, he's also heard from schools like Ohio State. I believe Oregon was in the mix for him as well. Would not shock me if there was a little bit of a backdoor operation there and maybe somewhere he visited during the winter, doesn't need to visit, gets on the phone, has a conversation that he likes what he hears, things work out, he goes to one of those schools. But Derek Harmon and Simeon Barrow, again, I think the two most valuable players in the transfer portal for my money right now. Bit of a surprise coming within the last couple of days. Chief Borders, Nebraska edge, 6'4", 245 pounds, was a guy that had gotten rave reviews during the spring from Matt Rule and that staff out there. Didn't play a ton this past season, but was going to be counted on this upcoming season to be a guy for you off the edge for Nebraska. He has since hit the portal. Now, Chief Borders transferred from Florida to Nebraska originally. I'm curious to see what his market is. Feels like the SEC could be in the mix for him. Premium position, edge rushers at this point in time, the demand is very high and the supply is pretty low. So a guy like Chief Borders with his abilities, you have to believe will have his fair share of suitors. Surprising for the folks in Nebraska. I have to believe that because he was going to be someone who played this upcoming season. A couple of quick notes here on the quarterback position. You got some commitments. Jakari Brown, transfer quarterback, was at Miami for a period of time. He's headed to UCF. I love the fit for him. Sit behind KJ Jefferson for a year. You got a couple of years of eligibility. Then go do your thing in a system that I think plays to his skill set. I love that. Jacoby Criswell is transferring back to UNC. He was originally playing ball there, transferred to Arkansas. Now he's heading back to Chapel Hill. Same thing with him that I appreciate about Jakari Brown. I appreciate for Jacoby Criswell. Sit for a season, get to learn the ropes a little bit more, and be under a offensive coordinator and quarterback coach in Chip Lindsey, who's got a pretty strong track record of working with and developing quarterbacks. So guys that won't start this upcoming season, but still I think could have a pretty strong impact on the future for both UCF and UNC respectively. So that's the latest from the portal. We're about to hear from Portal Pete here in just a matter of moments. But regardless, make sure you're subscribed. The transfer portal coming to a finish line when it comes to guys throwing their name in there. But even so, man, I think we still have a couple of big decisions looming for some of these high-profile guys in the transfer portal. So that's the latest on that front when it comes to what's going on with commitments and names jumping out there. And, college football, as of late, I think has just kind of been in a state of change. Whether it be the portal, whether it be NIL, or whether it be some news that broke last night. And broke's a strong word, but rumblings that broke last night from ESPN, there are deep talks, apparently, that are going on around revenue sharing becoming a reality in college football. Now, if you've watched the show or you've just kind of been in tune with college football for the better part of the last 3 to 4 years, this isn't surprising to you. But seeing this start to gain some more steam, I think it makes it feel like it's a lot closer than maybe we perceived it would be. So again, ESPN reporting they are in deep talks to eventually get to revenue sharing. Now, the legal part of this we'll unpack a little bit more with Pete Nakos. But what we need to know as college football fans is that essentially the NCAA, they're in a little antitrust deal with versus the House. And essentially what we're saying here is against the NCAA, hey, you can't restrict athletes from how they make their money and what they make their money from. And so if they were to lose that, they would owe something like a smooth $4 billion in damages. I'll tell you what, $4 billion, even for an operation like the NCAA, doesn't feel good. So they're trying to settle this thing as quickly as possible. This is going to happen. Okay, this is going to be a thing that happens. And the reason why I think we can come to that conclusion is because this whole story arc is taking the exact same story arc that we've seen other things in college football eventually start as an idea and then eventually become a reality. Like, it's taken the exact same path as the college football playoff did, as NIL did. We're starting to arrive at that place. And I don't mean specifically from this person reported this, then this happened, and this happened. I mean from a macro level, there are 4 phases that I believe are essentially the stepping stones to college football ideas becoming realities. The first is that's a good idea. Is phase 1. People are saying that's a good idea, whether it be someone like me behind a microphone, whether it be someone who's on a show at ESPN, whether it be, message board juice. Like there's some rumblings from a fan base level and from a media level of this makes sense. And then it goes from that level to people that have a little bit more influence saying things like that. So that first phase has already happened. We've already crossed that barrier. The second phase is important people openly supporting it. Jim Harbaugh, during national championship media days, is asked about it, and he's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, these are the guys that are producing this revenue. They might as well see a fair share of it. Does that not make sense to anybody else? Matt Rule talked about it. Trev Alberts talked about it when he was at Nebraska. They were already preparing for revenue sharing becoming a reality. People that are important, have influence, openly supporting it, check that box. Phase 1 and phase 2 are complete. Now, phase 3 is the phase that we are currently in right now. And phase 3 is where there are real rumblings. You get the alert on your phone from the On3 Twitter account tweeting out that, hey, Pete Thamel's reporting that there's maybe some legs to this. Or you got reports from Ross Dellinger, hey, this actually might be happening. People that you count on as newsbreakers, Pete Nakos is probably another person that you would group into that category, starting to say, hey, no, this isn't just a good idea. This isn't just something that Jim Harbaugh is talking about. There are people in suits that make decisions that are having conversations about this, and we're starting to move further and further into that sphere. So we are currently in phase 3. Now, phase 4 is kind of a two-parter. Phase 4 is where there's a little bit of silence. So it would not surprise me now if this whole thing goes dark until after the season, or probably pretty conveniently right up until bowl season or before the national championship game. That's where we're going to get a little bit more of some news. But right now we're going into that silence period. This is going to be a talking point for us probably for the next couple of months because we don't know what's going to happen. There'll be silence. And then right around national championship time, bowl season, maybe even rivalry weekend, because that's when some stuff will start to take place when it comes to this whole antitrust lawsuit having to get some finality. Boom. You'll get a report pop up on your phone. You'll hear the On3 Twitter account saying, hey, this is what's happening. Revenue sharing has been approved. It's going down. Here we go. Silence into a final report. That's what's going to happen here. That is phase 4. So what does it mean for us as college football fans? What does it mean if you're a fan of Oklahoma or Tennessee or Virginia Tech? I think what it means is it could be the solution to some of our problems in power conference football. Because so many people right now are frustrated by the NIL-fueled transfer portal moves. A guy's unhappy with what he's making out of school. He ends up transferring somewhere else to make more money. Well, what we're hearing, what the report is saying, is that it would likely be a $20 million revenue share annually to some of the big boys, if you will, across college football. So if you are, I'm assuming, a Nebraska or Alabama, you're probably getting $20 million annually to divvy up among your roster. Now, previously it had been, well, we don't like seeing guys change rosters because they want to make more money. Well, now you have more money to help retain your roster. So maybe we see more roster continuity. Maybe we see more guys stay certain places. Wishful thinking, but I think that's one opportunity. Where this is really going to impact the college football landscape, though, is at the G5 level. Because I don't think that revenue sharing, from what I'm understanding of this, is going to be divvied equally to a Charlotte as it would be a North Carolina. And so those schools, they were already hemorrhaging talent from the transfer portal and from NIL. That's just going to be, I think, even more so propelled by this whole move. So unfortunate. That's kind of the way this thing is trending. That's what I would see happening. I don't want that to happen, but I think that's where we're heading. Bottom line here, if we're just going to give our opinion on this, this makes sense. Okay, this makes sense because there's too much money being made for the people that are supporting and providing the product to not see any of it, just like Jim Harbaugh said. And I'm not for the professionalization of college sports. We've been on the exact opposite side of that fence this entire time, throughout NIL, throughout transfer portal, throughout, X, Y, and Z changes in college football. Not that we're anti those moves, but we are anti-professionalizing college sports. But if money is the problem, money might be the solution. You got Ryan Day saying, hey, it's going to take $13 million for me to keep my roster intact. Folks are upset about guys changing schools. Well, yeah, I think we would all change jobs if we were getting $1 million to go somewhere else, right? Like, that's just kind of human logic. Now we are, I believe, more properly equipping different schools across the country to retain their roster. Also, I think it's worth noting here, for bowl games, we're upset about guys sitting out. Who's to say that we don't see more stars playing bowl games? They want to make sure they protect their future financially. Maybe you give them a little bit more insurance financially to play in that bowl game. Also, we're upset with seeing NIL standoffs during the season. You hear horror stories about guys saying, I'm not playing in this game unless I get X amount of dollars. Okay, well, that's fine. We'll just fine you. We'll fine you. You don't want to play in this game? You want to be a professional and get paid professional dollars? We'll treat you like a pro. So we'll see how this whole thing shakes out. It's a whole other arm of structure that I think could be good for college football. Will be very, very tough on the G5, which we would hate to see. But if you're a power conference football fan, I think it ultimately could be a good thing for you and how you retain your roster. Changes are coming, man. The times they are a-changing. I think it's a Bob Dylan song. I think it's a Bob Dylan song. Chat, let me know who sings "The Times Are a-Changin'." One thing's for sure, man, as the times change, there's one person to be tuned in with across the Twitter sphere. He covers the transfer portal like nobody else. He is the College Football 25 authority source for us truly on this show. He is the smartest individual that I have come into contact with, and that is Portal Pete Nakos, joining the show right now. Busy, man. Hey, we're almost at the finish line here, brother. We're almost there. How are we living?
I'm great, man. And yes, Bob Dylan did sing that song.
Okay, there you go. See, I just right on cue. I say smartest
person
I know. Boom, you answer who sings that song. Right on the money, man. So talk me through this. You just released an intel piece over at on3.com, the latest scoop.
Yeah.
Guys have until a minute before midnight tonight to submit their paperwork. What are we expecting here as we get to the finish line? Is it going to be a mad dash of guys throwing their name in there and trying to get some NIL dollars, or what's going to happen here?
Yeah, I mean, so guys have to obviously submit their paperwork by midnight tonight, but then compliance departments have 48 hours to put names in the portal. So I still expect things to be pretty crazy Wednesday and Thursday in terms of entries. And then, as we reported yesterday, the grad transfer deadline got pushed back a day. So we'll still see some grad transfers popping in on Friday. Yesterday was one of the craziest days we've had yet in these like 10 days or whatever it's been at this point. And I think that things will continue to get busier.
Yeah, a lot of big names jumping in there, like Peyton Woodyard jumping in there. I think that probably surprised some folks in Tuscaloosa. What are some other big names that you're watching right now before I start just peppering you with questions on specific names?
So some of the big names I'm watching right now want to try to figure out what Tyler Barron's going to do, right? The Louisville edge was at Miami this weekend. I know Ole Miss is still somewhat interested. That he had committed to the Rebels before he flipped to Louisville, and then I've been told that the USC is going to try to make a push too. So that's one name I'm keeping an eye on. And then obviously the other three big defense linemen on the market right now: the TCU defense lineman Demonic Williams, and then the two Michigan State defense linemen Simeon Barrow and Derek Harmon. Those are kind of like the guys I'm trying to figure out where they're going. They're all kind of wrapping up visits, and that's going to be the next few dominoes that I'm kind of keeping an eye on at the moment.
I was about to ask you about those two big boys from Michigan State, man. I mean, we talked about it on our segment to start this show. Guys like that, 6'5", 320, and 6'3", 290, respectively, do not grow on trees, regardless of the transfer portal. Is there any feel you have on either one of those guys when it comes to maybe some schools that are finalists for them that we can tell at this point, or still too soon to tell?
No, there's a few, and the other thing I'll add on what you were saying too, JD, is I mean, they don't make 6'5", 300-pound guys with experience. Like these guys have played a lot of football, and that's invaluable, and you know that. But when it comes to schools to watch, Simeon Barrow was at Miami yesterday. He's already visited Missouri and LSU. Texas could land a final visit, from my understanding. So I think that there's yet to be too much clarity just yet with him. On the flip side, Derek Harmon called off his Miami visit. He's been to Colorado and USC. I like those two schools a lot right now, but whenever you talk about Derek Harmon, you have to remind yourself that he visited Oregon and Ohio State in the wintertime before he withdrew from the portal. So those are kind of the four schools I'm personally watching at the moment for Derek Harmon.
I was going to say, man, you get out to Colorado, Ryan Garcia's on the sideline. Lil Wayne's doing a concert. It's like, okay, maybe it's not that cold. Maybe I could see myself out here in the altitude in Boulder. So, I mean, if you get on campus there, I feel like that has to play in your favor. Speaking of a guy from Colorado, though, Cormani McClain signed with NIL representation. Does that impact his choices in your mind? Like, is that going to help him when we talk about where he could end up at some point, having someone to, represent him to a degree?
Wrote about it this morning, but also wrote about it this weekend, and I've said it a few times. No school has really emerged yet as like the one to watch for Cormani McClain. From my understanding, I've talked to some people. I don't think he's made a visit yet. Actually reached out to his mother, and she said they had released a visit schedule when she was ready, but haven't heard anything else. I think signing NIL representation is maybe a sign that this is going to maybe start to pick up some speed. You look across the country, and a lot of these agents have a lot to do about guys going on visits, lining up visits, making sure that details are in order before a commitment. So I would think that signing representation maybe makes this pursuit of finding a new home a little bit more serious, per se.
Pete, what about Penny Boone? It looked like it was Kentucky and Georgia, and those were kind of the two schools for him. And now, out of nowhere, UCF is in the mix for the one-time Toledo running back, and then he's Louisville running back. I mean, what's the latest with him?
Yeah, Penny Boone obviously went in the portal earlier this month. He was supposed to go to Washington for a visit initially early in the month. That got called off. Same thing with an Ole Miss visit. Georgia and Kentucky, like you said, were in the mix. Georgia doesn't have a lot of scholarships. I believe Jaden Rashada took their last one.
Wow.
So that was kind of the holdup there. And then visited Kentucky, as it's been reported. I think academics are a hurdle for him, but I think he's going to figure it out. But we'll have to see. Visited UCF on Monday, and he's still on campus as of today. And things are trending towards the Knights at the moment. And on three, Steve Wiltfong and myself just put in some picks for him to land in Orlando.
Wow. Okay, so there you have it. Make sure you're tuned in with Pete Nakos over on Twitter, putting out picks. Okay, so lock it in over there. Pete, UCF not the only school in Florida that's making some noise. Miami getting 4 commitments over the weekend from the portal. Is it an NIL game for them, or why are they able to be so successful in the portal?
I'm not going to lie to you. Miami has one of the top NIL collectives and programs in the country. That's not really a secret at this point. At the same time, though, I think you look at some of those pickups, and they're really stacking the offense. And I know Sam Brown is not like the biggest wide receiver name, but he's talented. He's got experience with Shannon Dawson from his time at West Virginia. And I think it makes a lot of sense as a target for Cam Ward. And then obviously Damian Martinez, the best running back in the portal, and an all Pac-12 selection. So I really like those two pickups. And it'll be really interesting to see how this defensive side of the ball comes together too. Do they get Tyler Barron? Do they get one of the Michigan State defensive linemen? How does that come together? That's what I'm keeping my eye on now.
It's really funny how the excuse of, well, they dropped a bag at the last minute has sort of evolved. Like, it used to be they dropped a bag, that's illegal. Now it's like, hey, they dropped a bag, and my response to that would be, well, why didn't you? Why didn't you drop a bag? If that was what it's going to take to land this guy, why are you salty about being broke? You know what I'm saying? Maybe we don't speak too loudly about that if Miami wants to pay top dollar. Speaking of top dollar, revenue sharing. Some rumblings last night. You reported on it as well over at on3.com. Just your overall thoughts on where this thing is headed and kind of what this means for college football, as broad as that is.
Yeah, I mean, great reporting by Pete Thamel, and Ross Dellinger had a great story earlier today kind of breaking it down. This has been something we knew was coming. I mean, obviously there's some really thorough reporting by ESPN, but we kind of knew the settlement talks were happening. They've obviously ramped up. None of it, is really surprising to me. And that's just my insider. I've been following this kind of take, but at the same time, it's obviously monumental to the future of college sports. The revenue sharing is coming. We've been talking about it, me and UJD, for quite a while on here, but how it all shakes out is really interesting. Obviously, this House versus NCAA antitrust case, it sounds like the NCAA is going to owe some money, however it kind of shakes out. And I mean, the millions, if not billions of dollars. I think billions might be a stretch if we get to a settlement, but a lot of money's on the line here. And I think the thing that we have to keep an eye on, and you pointed it out as I was jumping on, is what's it mean for the entire college football landscape as a whole, not just like the Power Four.
Yeah, I mean, would that help roster retention in your mind? Because you're dropping $20 million on specific big boy schools like, hey, maybe I can keep that All-American wide receiver that was going to jump in the portal and go to X, Y, and Z school. Is it help roster retention? Are we on the right track there? Or is it like, yeah, everyone getting $20 million is great, but the big boys are still the big boys and they still have a little extra firepower?
I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I think Shannon Terry, our founder, made a great point on Twitter. Like, NIL deals are still going to exist in this new landscape. And with that, right, if there's a cap, like a $15 to $20 million cap on revenue sharing, then you're obviously going to have collectives still exist and pay out extra dollars. I guess the big thing that we need to watch here is, do they strike some sort of a collective bargaining deal, right? That's what they have in the professional landscape. If you get a collective bargaining deal, then it can ensure that there's not as much tampering. And the reason why I say there wouldn't be as much tampering is because a college collective bargaining deal would set in place all these types of rules and fines that would come along with tampering and things like that.
Interesting. Okay, so those are some big fish, obviously, that are swimming around in the college football ocean right now. There's another big fish out there, though, that I think we need to address. It's sort of the whale in the ocean, if you will. EA Sports, College Football 25. Whenever I have a question about this, you're the first person I text. A little bit of news breaking yesterday from, I believe it was Matt Brown with Extra Points having a newsletter, and then he went on Feinbaum as well. Alternate covers is sounding like the way that we're going to be trending here. Do we know the number of covers? Do you have a gauge for this, or just any thoughts in general on the latest from College Football 25 and EA Sports?
You know, I've been hearing about these alternate covers for a few months, and I have yet to get the clarity on this, but it sounds like there could be like some main title covers and then maybe some other covers as well, like maybe a Carson Beck could be on like a special edition, like kind of like Ultimate Team cover. Like, I'm not saying it's Carson Beck for sure, but I've heard of like some different varieties of covers. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously really exciting. It's gonna be really fun to play with the actual athletes in the game. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it kind of all shakes out. And I mean, you know, it's like, you've never been able to play with like a player who's been on the cover in the game. So that'll be fun to check out.
It's wild, dude. It is wild that we're entering into a world now where you can play. If Carson Beck's on the cover, Carson Beck's the quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs and not QB 15 or, you know, whatever other moniker we were using for that starting quarterback. We're using the Ohio Bobcats in dynasty mode. Is that accurate, or who are we taking to a national title?
There's a possibility. There's a possibility. But, you know, there's always some fun, too, JD, in taking, like, a bottom-tier Power 4 team and trying to see what you can do with them. Like, I know that isn't always everyone. I've had a lot of fun with Vanderbilt and NCAA 14. Yeah. Hopefully we can restructure some conferences even more.
I love it. Iowa scoring 40 a game. Last thing I'll say here, if there's a transfer portal special edition – for all the suits watching this, because I'm sure they're tuned in. They're always tuned in, the good folks at EA Sports. Let's get a Pete Nakos cover, all right? The ball is in your court. We'll leave it at that. Pete, you're the man, brother. Get some sleep. Hopefully here soon, and we appreciate all your time.
I appreciate it, JD. Have a great day.
That's the man, Pete Nakos. Again, make sure you're following him on Twitter. He just put out a intel piece, legitimately like 15 minutes before we got on the air. Pete and I talked about some of the high notes from that piece. But that was just an appetizer. He legitimately goes into, I think, double-digit names. So go check that out at on3.com. Nobody doing better work when it comes to covering the transfer portal than On3's Pete Nakos. And also follow Steve Wiltfong, follow Hayes Fawcett, follow the transfer portal account from On3, follow the On3 Man account. Like, if you're following all the On3 socials and the people involved with On3, I promise you're not going to miss a minute of anything transfer portal. So stay dialed in there. The best way to do that is by subscribing here and also following those social channels. We appreciate Pete coming on, man. We're going to talk more about College Football 25 here in just a little bit. All right, going to do that to wrap the show here. But we still got to talk about Nebraska with Dylan Raiola. We're going to talk about Miami. But before we get to that, let's talk about the takeaways we have from this most recent weekend of spring games. It wasn't the same buffet that we've had the last couple of weekends, just in terms of sheer quantity. But even so, man, something to take away, I think, from a number of different spring games. I mentioned Nebraska. Let's start there, man. I think we know who their starting quarterback is. Like, we can have a conversation around Heinrich Harburg and his, dual threat ability and what he brings to the table there and his experience, but, like, our eyes work just fine. We all saw what number 15 can do when he's playing quarterback. We all saw the different level of play that he brings to that team, man. Dylan Raiola is going to be your starting quarterback. And we had Sean Callahan from Husker Online on the roundtable, the On3 roundtable, yesterday, and I thought he put it perfectly. He said, I think we know where we're going. It's just a matter of how we get there. Dylan Raiola is going to be your starting quarterback. It's just a matter of, do you name him your starter during fall camp? Do you name him your starter once the portal closes up? Like, how does this work if you're Matt Rule, and how does this work if you're in Nebraska? For the record, I think Heinrich Haarberg still needs a role when it comes to what they do in 2024 offensively, whether it's specific running packages for him at quarterback, whether you work him in there in the H-back. Like, Heinrich Haarberg is going to be a part of your success, but Dylan Raiola is going to be your starting quarterback. You saw it on display in the spring game. He's dropping it in a bucket to Jalen Lloyd. He's throwing, over the middle lasers. He's ad-libbing and throwing off different arm angles, different platforms, like everything that you would like your quarterback to be from a physical standpoint. Dylan Raiola has versions of that for you. Now, what he's going to be long-term at Nebraska, very different than what we saw in the spring game. In the spring game, he was 16 for 22, 239 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Worth noting, if you were just box score scouting, you see the interception, you say, freshman mistake. He threw a laser that hit his wide receiver in the hands, and it popped up in the air, became an interception. So the thing with me watching him play in that spring game, I didn't see a lot of, freshman moments from him. And there should have been, just so we're on the same page. There should have been okay, he should be a senior in high school. He's an early enrollee. He'll eventually get better and lose those kind of moments. You saw some spring moments. You saw some moments where it's like, okay, it is practice 15. This team is still gelling. But I didn't see the Dylan Raiola rolling right, throwing left across his body for a horrible decision, interception. I saw Dylan Raiola, for the most part, played really under control, throw it away when it wasn't there, tuck it when it wasn't there, took good care of the football outside of that fluky interception, and I saw him just deal it up, deal dimes downfield, man. That was a total game changer for what Nebraska was last year, what they're going to be in 2024. We got more thoughts on that a little bit later in the show, but he made a lot of his layups. That was something Nebraska didn't do consistently last year at quarterback. They had no quarterback throw more touchdowns than interceptions. Heinrich Haarberg had a 7-7 ratio, which was the best on the team out of all the quarterbacks that tried their hand. And they had a 52% completion percentage as a team, one of the worst in the country. If you make your layups as a quarterback at Nebraska, this offense is going to score more than 18 points a game and likely going to win more than 5 games. All right, so that's what they did last year. Expect them to improve upon that this upcoming season. How good can Nebraska be if Dylan Raiola plays the way he did in that spring game when they get to the fall and the games are really counting? Nonetheless, if you're a Nebraska fan, hard to not be encouraged. For Colorado, man, they had their spring game, their spring showcase of sorts. It was everything from put the ball down and move it, 11-on-11 scrimmage, to 7-on-7, little one-on-ones with the offensive and defensive line. My big takeaway from that spring game is their fastball out there in Boulder from last season is still going to be their fastball in 2024. And that is Shedeur Sanders is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and they have wide receivers that are going to make plays for him. LeJontay Wester, transfer wide receiver from FAU, he got a touchdown. I thought he looked really impressive. Omarion Miller, you know what he's going to be in 2024. He flashed against USC last season, and they're excited about him and his tools. Jimmy Horn Jr., big play wide receiver for them a season ago. Travis Hunter, we know what he is. My thing with Colorado is if they're throwing for the same amount of yards they did last season, they're throwing for right around 300, what they averaged last year in that neighborhood. Can they patch the leaks in this speedboat? Can they patch the leaks? Because Colorado has some very real strengths. What I just mentioned, their ability to push the ball downfield and what they have at quarterback is their strength. That is their fastball. Are they able to supplement that with a solid defense? Are they able to stop the run effectively? Are they able to protect Shedeur Sanders with that scheme and how much they spread the field and how much they spread out the defense? Are they able to manufacture a run game? That's what I'm waiting to see, and that's what I'm excited about. But speaking of the fastball, it's the pass game, absolutely. It's also what they do when they get recruits on campus. And we saw that as a byproduct. They got Ryan Garcia there on the sideline, the boxer. They got Lil Wayne out there doing a concert. Like, it is a production when you step foot in Boulder. And we've been very adamant. We would love to see Coach Prime do some in-home visits. That's what we would like to see, but the fact remains the same. You get to Boulder, you get a very good impression of what it would be like to play there, and you get wowed quite a bit. So I'm excited to see what they do. But the fastball of the way they do campus visits, and the way they're going to throw the football, those two things are still intact. The spring game is a tremendous example of that. Nobody does atmosphere like Coach Prime. We'll leave it at that. Oregon, their spring game was this past Saturday. They have a hilarious quarterback room. There's no other way to say it. I still cannot believe that Dan Lanning got not one, but two of the top 5 quarterbacks in this past transfer portal cycle. He didn't get one the year before, and then the other this upcoming season. He got both Dante Moore and Dylan Gabriel in that winter transfer portal window. Dylan Gabriel, I thought, looked solid. I think you see what he's going to be at Oregon as he gets more and more comfortable. He's going to be a good decision maker. He's going to be a quick decision maker. In that spring game, he was a good decision maker. He's still probably a click or two slow from what that offense is going to require of him. But again, practice 15, he's still getting his feet underneath him. He's still learning the language. He's going to be just fine when it comes time for the fall. Expect that offense to hum. He still threw 2 touchdowns, and I thought he looked like a starting quarterback for Oregon this upcoming season. That's what he's going to be. Dante Moore, as I mentioned, he was a 5-star from the industry in 2023, and he somehow found his way to being a backup at Oregon. I'll say this again. I think Oregon has 2 starting caliber quarterbacks in that room, and one is just down to sit a year. That's an incredible luxury if you're Dan Lanning. In this spring game, though, I thought you saw Dante Moore flash a little bit. You saw the arm talent. You saw him look sharp. Give him another year in that system. Give him the chance to sit, learn the playbook, be able to acclimate to Eugene, acclimate to the offense, acclimate to that locker room. And when it comes time for him to play games in 2025, it's going to be lights out. He's going to be lights out, and I don't expect Oregon offensively to miss a beat at all in 2024 or in 2025. I'm not saying Dylan Gabriel is going to be Bo Nix, but I think they have every opportunity to stay on track with what they did last year, moving into this upcoming season. And then with Dante Moore, the continuity with the talent at quarterback, they're going to be in good shape. They're dialed in out there. So some takeaways from this past weekend of spring games. Now we're kind of launching into that summer phase of college football. The portal's about to close. Spring games are wrapping up. I promise you, though, one thing, this show doesn't stop. Whether it's summer, winter, spring, fall, we're talking college football all the time, so make sure you're locked in there. But those are our takeaways from this past weekend of spring games. I mentioned spring games, and I mentioned Nebraska. I think we got to really have a conversation together about Dylan Raiola. We do, because Dylan Raiola went out in the spring game this past Saturday and got buckets. As we just talked about, 16 for 22, 239 yards, 2 touchdowns. The 1 interception was off his wide receiver's hands. I mean, it's hard to fault the guy too much for that. He's a ceiling changer for Nebraska. He is. And Nebraska, they went 5-7 last year, and you've been sold optimism for the better part of the last probably 2 or 3 years if you're a Nebraska fan. Hey, this is the year make a bowl game. Hey, this is the year of the roster. You lost so many close games last year. That won't happen again. And then you lose 5 one-score games in 2023. I'm not here to talk about the one-score games as much. We're going to talk about them for sure, but I want us to really hone in on why Dylan Raiola changes the game for Nebraska in 2024. We'll do that right now, but make sure you're subscribed. Nebraska fans, y'all been good to us, man. Y'all been great to us, and we appreciate you for that. If you're just now finding this show, Nebraska fan, Virginia Tech fan, Jacksonville State fan, whoever you're a fan of, we talk college football. We talk college football all year long. So subscribe here to stay up with all of it. Also follow me on the socials at JD Piquel on Twitter and on Instagram. We post prompts all the time on there that we then incorporate into the show and incorporate y'all's responses into the show. So as I was saying, man, Dylan Raiola, pretty clearly the guy. To quote Sean Callahan, we know where it's going. It's a matter of how we get there. Dylan Raiola, our eyes all work just fine. He's going to be QB1 when you open up for games that really matter. Again, Nebraska fans, you're scared to be optimistic. You're scared to trust again. I understand. The heart's been broke so many times you don't know what to believe. Little Rod Wave syndrome going on for our folks out there in Lincoln. Dylan Raiola, I think, is the equivalent of the flavor packet to the ramen noodles to this Nebraska roster. Like, you can kind of take it or leave it. You see some solid nutritional value with this roster. A lot of returning production. 78% plus both back on offense and defense from last year's team that played in a lot of close games. Defense that allowed 18 points a game. But you add in Dylan Raiola, and I think the big thing with him is he is the kind of player that can potentially shorten or at best bridge the roster talent gap that you might have with some of these other teams in your conference. Like Nebraska, let's just call a spade here. They're not going to have more dudes than Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon. It is what it is. But when you have Dylan Raiola, that might be your equalizer. And I'm not saying he's going to put the team on his back and just will you to a victory over some of the best teams in your conference, but I am saying he changes the way that those games can flow. For example, when you play against some of those teams, they might have a superior pass rush. They might get to Dylan Raiola a little bit more quickly than you would like them to. But the thing with Dylan Raiola, the off-platform stuff, right? He doesn't have to be set to throw. We saw him in multiple instances in that spring game be able to throw the football without his feet set. That's an equalizer. The pass rush is superior. He's able to negate that pass rush by getting rid of the ball quickly off platform. Or maybe that coverage is just, let's just call it, they're locked in. They're locked in and they're able to kind of keep a pretty good coverage throughout the course of a Saturday on your wide receiving core. They're superior. That's the matchup that they have. However, Dylan Raiola, with his accuracy, with his RPMs he puts on the football, he's able to maybe fit some passes in there that previous quarterbacks at Nebraska weren't able to. And it sounds like I'm being hyperbolic here. I'm just saying situationally, Dylan Raiola is going to help close the gap or bridge the gap for you when you play those teams. I'm not saying you beat them. I'm not saying they go win the Big Ten. But I am saying that with Dylan Raiola, he totally changes the ceiling of what Nebraska can be in 2024. Because I think the frustration for Nebraska fans is you look at 2023 and you had a tremendous governor on your football team. Like you had a defense that was, I think, one of the best in the country, and nobody's talking about them because of their record last year. They went 5-7, but they kept teams to 18 points a game. They kept teams to 4 yards of play. Not a carry, not a pass, 4 yards of play. That's top 5 in the country. And they bring back, again, 78% of that production from last season. But you weren't able to see those strengths and reap the rewards of those, benefits because the offense was just, let's be real, it was abysmal. They scored 18 points a game. They completed 52% of their passes. They had 6 yards a pass, good for one of the worst in the country. 6% of the passes last year for Nebraska were interceptions. 6% interception rate. That's 132nd in the country. Doesn't matter how good your defense is if your offense can't do anything to help you. That was Nebraska routinely last year. And I told you I wasn't going to harp on the one-score losses, but let's just unpack those a little bit. 5 one-score losses. All 5 of those games failed to score 20 points. In 4 of those games, you had a quarterback account for at least 2 turnovers, whether it be a fumble or interception, at least 2 turnovers. So the way that I'm looking at this thing, with how good that defense is supposed to be in 2024, if Dylan Raiola is just solid, if he's just steady, like let's throw a stat line out there just to kind of have this mental exercise. Let's say he throws for 20 touchdowns and 5 picks. How good is Nebraska? Because last year, again, your best touchdown-interception ratio was 7 touchdowns, 7 picks. Nobody had a better ratio than that. If you're 20-5, Nebraska's winning 6 games, 7 games, depending on how good that defense is and depending on how much Dylan Raiola elevates in certain situations. How good is Nebraska next year? Because at the most important position on your team, the quarterback, you now upgrade. There's no way around it. You upgrade from a talent level, and I think overall from the floor level, he is going to be a better overall piece for you than what you've had there previously. And is there going to be growing pains? Absolutely. There may very well be some freshman games for Dylan Raiola where he's seeing ghosts, the game's too fast, he's making poor decisions. Like that might be a game, but I'm telling you right now, the long-term trajectory of 2024 for Dylan Raiola is overall a superior net positive to what last year was. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. His ceiling is different. What he can be at Nebraska is different. And as a result of that, the ceiling for Nebraska in 2024 is vastly different as well. Because last year they ran for 175 yards a game offensively. If they have that to go with their freshman quarterback this upcoming season, and they can support him in that way, and they equip him with a solid defense to go with that and say, hey, Dylan Raiola, you don't need to go win the game for us. Just play within yourself, play within this scheme, make your layups. We're going to win football games. That's something different they've had in a long, long time, and I think that would give Nebraska their best season since 2016. So, break out the hopium. If you're a Nebraska fan, I think that this is the year they make a bowl game. I've said that many times, and I think Dylan Raiola is a massive reason as to why that is possible and why that will happen in 2024. Ceiling changer, man. Ceiling changer in every single sense of the word. That's Dylan Raiola for you. Speaking of changing the ceiling, man, that was what Cam Ward was for Miami, right? Miami has been portaling like a program from the winter and now into the spring. Miami over the weekend had 4 commitments in 2 days. They landed Houston wide receiver Sam Brown, who is a burner. Oregon State running back Damian Martinez, the best player in the portal for my money. A Louisville linebacker Jason Alderman, and then Marshall corner Dione Hill, all committed to the Canes. Also worth noting, you're seeing that tide come in for the Hurricanes, right? You're seeing some players added to that roster. You're also seeing some players from Miami hit the portal. I don't want to speak too authoritatively on this, but I have to believe that you're seeing some players more than likely being informed, hey, this is how we see you on our roster moving forward. You know, we can kind of put 2 and 2 together there. Bottom line, Miami, from their vantage point, is upgrading at a talent level on their roster. So why are they doing it? How are they doing it? Let's talk about it right now, because I think a lot of people, and we talked about this with Pete Nakos earlier on in the show if you've been tuned into the live show, man. A lot of people are going to yell, they're dropping bags. And it's funny, they'll say, hey, they're dropping a bag on them at the last minute, and that's why they're committing to Miami. And I'm not here to tell you that's not true. I'm just here to tell you we might want to rethink that argument about they're dropping bags. That's the reason they're landing that kid. Because I'm here to tell you NIL's a reality now. If you want to play the ball game, you're going to have a better chance to win when it comes to acquiring talent. And so saying they're dropping bags used to be a negative thing because it used to mean, hey, they're cheating. Hey, they are acquiring that recruit or that transfer in an unethical fashion that is against the rules. Where now it's like, hey, they just care more, they have better resources, and they're making it happen, and you're not. Like, my response to that is always, well, if it was a matter of the bag, that means you could have dropped a bigger bag and you didn't. We say it a lot on this show. I don't think it's a good idea to yell about being broke, but, do what you want to do. Again, Miami, serious about playing ball, reaping the rewards of it, you have to believe. If you got resources and you can use them, more power to you. I think it's deeper than that, though, too. I think Mario Cristobal is also just doing what he does. When he took that job at Miami, coming over from Oregon, there was a couple of things that we said about him. The first was, okay, he's coming home. This is a place that matters to him, that means something to him. And we also said he's gonna get his dudes. Like, he's in one of the most talent-rich places in all of America when it comes to the high school level. He's going to get dudes. So far, 2 top 10 classes for the Canes in 2 years for Miami. Also, they're going to work on the portal by nature of what I just said, 4 commits in the last 2 days, one of which being the top player in the portal in Damian Martinez. The thing with Mario Cristobal in Miami that I think is unique that maybe gets overlooked a little bit in this whole discussion around how they acquire talent, Mario Cristobal isn't faking anything when he's pitching guys on coming to the U. Like, a lot of coaches, not that they're faking it, but they are projecting quite a bit about to what their team is going to one day be or what they can accomplish there. They're projecting it without ever having actually seen it done at that place. Mario Cristobal, that's not the case. He's been a part of 2 national championships at Miami from the 80s when he was there. Like, Mario Cristobal knows what it looks like when Miami is the U, not just Miami. He's seen that. He's been there. He's done that. He's acquired that blueprint. And so when he tells these guys, hey, come play for us here, here's what it's like when you win national titles at Miami, here's what it's like when you compete for conference titles at Miami, when we're winning ball games out here in Coral Gables, he knows what that's like. And he's not just trying to sell them on this vision that's never happened. He gets the U, and that's one of the, I think, most overlooked X factors when it comes to him being able to acquire talent. Because when you can look someone in their eyes and know that they believe wholeheartedly what they're saying, it's not just some sales pitch, you can tell that. Recruits and people in general, they can sniff out fake. I don't think there's anything fake about Mario Cristobal and what he's pitching out there at Miami. Have to also believe the Cam Ward effect, especially for the offensive players, is a real thing. Understanding, okay, we're going to have someone who can pull the trigger for us at quarterback. Like, we're going to be able to get this thing started. If we don't succeed at Miami, it's not because we didn't have the right guy at the most important position on the field. Cam Ward is a dude, and that's been a sentiment across college football circles. Everyone I've talked to, whether it be in the representation space, whether it be in the coaching space, whether it be in the media space, the sentiment across the board is clear. People that have been to Coral Gables say, yeah, you know what? Cam Ward's a guy. Period, mic drop, the end. Recruits also know that. Transfer portal guys also know that. I promise you one thing, man, Sam Brown, he's not going somewhere where he can't catch the football if they don't have someone to throw him the rock. Damian Martinez probably also helps that he has someone to take the pressure off of him playing quarterback. Hey, play action, that's going to help Cam Ward. Hey, when Cam Ward lines up in the gun and they spread him out and that box is a little bit lighter because they're tired of being diced up, Damian Martinez is going to get a little bit better yards per carry than maybe he's had recently. All that's to say, can't overstate the way that that's going to impact acquiring offensive talent, the way it's impacted acquiring offensive talent to this point in the transfer portal cycle. Here's the last thing. I think Miami is in a place now where they are stable. You can't overstate stability. People probably used to wonder about what they were going to be if they went to Miami. How would they trend over the course of the next couple of years? They went 5-7, then they went 7-5. And now who they have at quarterback and how they've tooled this roster and what they're about to do in 2024 with that young talent nucleus, I think guys see themselves more so as the missing piece when they commit to a Miami. Because some teams you're trying to pitch the vision and you're trying to pitch the long term. Hey, come be a part of this as a building block, build this foundation for us, and in a couple of years we're going to win big time. These guys are thinking, well, they've already trended a certain way the last 2 years. In year 3, why can't we be a college football playoff team? Hey, they got Cam Ward and that young talent nucleus with a Francis Mauanoa and a Reuben Bain. Why can't we go compete for an ACC title this year? We just need someone to pop the top on our defense and Sam Brown. We just need someone who's going to be able to tote the mail for us a little bit, get north and south, and Damian Martinez. We just need one more puzzle piece, and then we can really get cooking. I think that's attractive to guys. I think at the end of the day, all these guys that play this sport at a high level have some competitive juice within them and want to win at a high level. It's a very open conference. We've said it a lot on this show, man. The ACC is wide the heck open. Clemson's a question mark. Florida State, a lot of unreturning production. A lot of new pieces across the board. NC State, they got a new quarterback. Virginia Tech, they bring back a lot, but they're also a question mark with how they're trending going into 2024. Can they keep that momentum? I'm looking at Miami, and I'd have a hard time today not picking them to at least be in that title game when it comes to that conference championship weekend. So Miami, they're portaling like a program. The conversation on NIL is just funny to me. If you got resources and you're using them, more power to you. Don't be upset about folks dropping bags if that's what it comes down to and you wouldn't drop the same bag or you couldn't drop the same bag. It is what it is. Mario Cristobal, there's no faking it. This is real deal now. He's been there. He's done that. He's seen what it's like when the U is the U. Not just Miami, but when it's operating where it's at a national title caliber. He's been a part of that. There's no faking here. It's all real deal with him. They're not just stable, man. I think they're at a place where they can really compete for some big things, and guys see themselves as the missing piece. It's not just a, hey, buy in now to be a part of success later. It's buy in now to be a part of success right now. I think that's attractive, and I think that's a big reason why they're landing the talent that they are right now on the transfer portal trail. So we've talked about a lot of things in the college football space, as we do on this show. And those are all important. They're all extremely important. They're all going to impact the way that your team plays when it comes to the fall. But I think it's time for us right now to talk about something that's maybe a little bit more pressing. Talk about something that's tugging on our heartstrings a little bit, really since 2014, 2013, if we're going to be real. And that is the return of College Football 25 from EA Sports. Got a little bit of news yesterday pertaining to what that cover could look like. We'll unpack what we know. We'll unpack some of my assumptions, and we'll also take a guess at who's going to be on that cover. We'll talk about it right now, but make sure you're subscribed. Okay, you're a college football sicko. You're watching a video in a one-off capacity about College Football 25, the video game, if you're watching this on YouTube. But if you're tuning into the live show, we appreciate you. Make sure you're subscribed because we're live Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, so dial in with us. If you're watching on podcast or listening on podcast, rather, we appreciate you too, man, being dialed in when you can make time to do it. So rate us, review us, all that good stuff. Subscribe to the feed and tell a friend about us while you're at it. So if you're wondering why we're talking about this right now, why we have an update, Matt Brown from Extra Points gave us some news yesterday. He has reported and had confirmed that there will be multiple versions of the College Football 25 cover. Now, he said this in his newsletter over at extrapoints.com, I believe. And then he also went on Paul Feinbaum's show yesterday and confirmed as much. Sounds like he knows who they're going to be. So we're going to try and get Matt Brown on this show as soon as possible. We're going to reach out to him and see what we can get done there. Don't think he's going to tell us who's actually on the cover, but he dropped a couple of Easter eggs. Here's what we know. All right, here's what we know. Multiple versions of the cover, as I mentioned. It will be an active and starting college football player from a power conference. So if you wanted to play with Caden Salter from Liberty, that's fine, but he's just not going to be on the cover for you. Also, not going to be Nick Saban. To me, that felt like the most layup way to go about it. If you just wanted to go with getting an all-encompassing one cover kind of way to go about it, but still, I appreciate that we're getting players that are actually in the game on the cover. This is interesting. All of these cover athletes are different positions. So meaning you're not going to get a Quinn Ewers and a Shedeur Sanders. You're not going to get a Carson Beck and a Jackson Dart. They're all different players from different positions from different conferences. So you're not going to have two quarterbacks from the SEC is the way that I interpreted that. Matt Brown also mentioned, and he tweeted this out saying, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but he thinks that there is one of those athletes that is going to be a surprise. He was surprised when he saw it. I'm assuming we'll be surprised as we see it as a college football public, but nonetheless, that's what we know right now. Now, when it comes to assumptions, tentatively, I believe July 19th is the release date everyone has circled. I am assuming that all these players on the cover are going to be draft eligible. I just have a hard time seeing them throw a Dylan Raiola on the cover when he hasn't played a game yet, or throwing a Caleb Downs on the cover when he still isn't draft eligible and he has another year to go about it in the college ranks. Could be, but that's the way that I'm approaching it. I'm also assuming that the guys on the cover here are not going to be transfer portal players at new destinations. Just a feel thing for me. I don't really have a ton of analysis behind that besides that's the way that it feels. I don't think you'll see Cam Ward from Miami. It's not something we've seen on Saturdays just yet, so why would it be on our cover? You catch my drift there? So who's going to be on the cover? Let's take our guess here. It could be 3 different covers. I'm going to just go ahead and say there's 4 different covers, Big 12, ACC, SEC, and Big 10. If you left one of those conferences out, it would be a tremendous slight to an entire portion of the college football public. So I think probably going with 4 covers is a good way to go about it. From the Big 12, I think it's got to be Travis Hunter. So that probably checks the wide receiver box and the corner box if you're counting positions and where they can go about it. Massive brand, one of the most massive brands in college football from Travis Hunter and Colorado alike. From the Big 12, I think it's got to be Travis Hunter. I feel really good about that. It could be Shedeur Sanders, but I think they're probably saving the quarterback position for one of these other conferences. And if you got Travis Hunter on the board with how massively known he is, I think he's one of your guys for the cover. So we'll go ahead and cast our prediction for him to be the cover for the Big 12. For the SEC, win a lot of, I kind of went back and forth on this. Carson Beck makes a lot of sense, man. I think that with the SEC being the most visible conference in college football, you probably burn your quarterback card here. Carson Beck makes a lot of sense. But I think Quinn Ewers as a personal brand maybe has a little bit more behind him. And then also the brand that Texas football is. I'm not saying it's superior to Georgia, but I think the trend that Texas is on right now, moving to the SEC, they just made the college football playoff. Like, people are excited about Texas right now, whereas Georgia has just been a mainstay as one of the elites of the elite in college football for a while now. I could see EA saying, we're going with Quinn Ewers. We're going to have him as our cover athlete for the SEC. And maybe them moving to the SEC also provides a little extra juice, a little extra momentum to putting him on the cover. I could see that being, the way they would go about it. But again, Carson Beck, I think, is absolutely possible, and I see all the reasons in the world if you were to put him on the cover. The Big Ten is tricky, man, because if you're counting now, we've got quarterback off the board. We've also gone, depending on how you look at it, we haven't had a defensive player just yet if we're trying to figure out how this all shapes up. The Big Ten and the ACC is the most tricky. The Big Ten, Ohio State would make a lot of sense. Massive brand. The thing with this, though, what I said at the top of this, how I don't think a transfer portal player will be on the cover, and it has to be a draft-eligible player on the cover, that removes the Caleb Downs from contention here. It removes Will Howard. He's a transfer portal player. It removes a Quinshon Judkins. He's a transfer portal player. I just think with Michigan winning the national championship last year, and you not putting someone from their team on the cover, I don't buy that. And Michigan, their identity has been running the football. Donovan Edwards made a pretty big national impact, I think, from his national championship performance. He's going to be RB1 in Michigan. I think he's your cover athlete for the Big Ten. I really do. The Michigan brand is massive. I don't see a way that you leave them off the cover with them having just won the Big Ten. Now, the ACC is the hardest to predict because there's no quarterback on the board. I'm going to go ahead and say there's no wide receiver or corner on the board with Travis Hunter. We'll say he wipes out 2 positions. No running back on the board. You got to get some big boys on the cover somehow, some way, right? It's got to happen. It's tough with the ACC because all those quarterbacks are transfers. So even if we hadn't burned our quarterback card, DJU, are we really throwing him on the cover with him never playing a down at Florida State? Cam Ward, are we really putting him on the cover with never playing a down at Miami? I have a hard time getting behind that. So we'll say they go defense. We'll say they go defensive line. I'm saying this is my surprise pick, all right? This is the surprise that I'm saying Matt Brown is alluding to. I'm saying Patrick Payton from Florida State, the edge defender, ends up on the cover for the ACC representative. He's going to have a massive year this year. His stock is already through the roof when it comes to what he's going to be in 2024. Florida State and their stock is through the roof, with them being nationally a contender year in and year out, as long as Mike Norvell is there now with the last 2 seasons, what they put together. I think he is the pick for the ACC. Again, that's my surprise pick. By nature of how we're putting this thing together and the options we have, I think Patrick Payton would make a lot of sense for the ACC. Now, the alternate plot for the surprise, let's just say my assumptions are wrong. I could see them going like Missouri's Luther Burden at wide receiver for Missouri. So that means that you counted Travis Hunter as like an athlete or a corner, so you didn't use your wide receiver chip. And then for the ACC, let's say that they were going to go with portal guys. Cam Ward from Miami would make a lot of sense if they were going to throw a portal player on there. So we'll see. Let me know in the comment section who you think is going to be on the cover here. It's an interesting exercise to break it down where you can't use a position more than once, and you have to use draft-eligible players in my mind. But, again, July 19th is the tentative release date. As we get more news, we'll break it down. And, again, we're going to reach out to our guy Matt Brown from Extra Points to see if we can't get him on the show and maybe get a little bit more intel out of him. But regardless, we appreciate y'all for being dialed in and making this show what it is. You know who's making this show what it is the man behind the curtain, producer extraordinaire, live punching it. He's wearing cool headphones typically, and he's got them back on now, baby. Let's go. Okay, it's a little headphone switch for the man, Nick Brake. Nick, what's up, baby?
Yeah, I'm going to wear these for the rest of my life because I'm not going to fall for that.
Oh, man.
Stint
you look good, brother. You look good. I wasn't sure because I saw you switch headsets, and I was like, maybe I need to give him a little more time. And then we put the headset back on. So a little headset switcheroo. So
the soundboard is a little too far. It doesn't quite reach with this cord. So,
dude, you're just making it happen.
Yeah.
That's why you're a Progrum guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.
You're a dog. You're an absolute dog. Okay, kickball game tomorrow. I want to touch on that before we get out of here. Anything from the chat to jump on here? Anything to unpack together? I want to get to 3 of these if we can. Any comments, questions, concerns?
So Armando has been talking about Miami and has been saying that, it just feels like something that people are hiding is that they don't have a person who can coach on game days. JD, he asks you, can Mario coach on game day?
I think so. I mean, he's got a couple of conference titles to his name when he was at different stops across the – he won conference titles at Oregon. I think he can coach on game day. I think there's the optics of the game against Georgia Tech where everyone's saying he should have taken a knee, and they should have taken a knee. But I think it's very ridiculous to define somebody by one moment during a college football season. Also, let's just be real here. I really respect his coordinators. I think Lance Guidry is tremendous defensively. I think Shannon Dawson is tremendous offensively. The steps they've made from year 1 to year 2 under both of those individuals, I think should be encouraging. I think is encouraging. Hit a little reset on the coordinators from year 1 to year 2. Now moving into year 3, got some continuity. So even if you don't like Mario Cristobal as a game day coach, you're entitled to your opinion, but I think his coordinators are more than capable, and I think they've proven that to this point.
Okay. JD, this question from the truth. Would you rather have an incredible defensive line with so-so DBs or the other way around?
That's a really good question. I think I would go defensive line because if I have so-so DBs, I can kind of dial up the pressure a little bit and speed up the shot clock for that quarterback to hopefully hide our DBs. I have a tougher time hiding our defensive line if they want to run the ball. Like if we don't have those big human beings up front, it's going to be a long day at the office, Nick. So I'm just going to go ahead and say we'll take the big defensive linemen. We'll impose our will, and we'll pray that we get to the quarterback quickly so those DBs don't have to get exposed.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, we get one more.
I love it.
Andrew, actually, we'll do one more, and then we'll go really quick.
I love
on
it.
Another.
I love it. Little no huddle, no mercy.
Because I've been ignoring OG Gary for the last couple of days. I apologize, my friend. What are your thoughts on the NFL draft? Do you have a steal from the draft?
So this is where I take off my non-bias hat. This is where I become extremely biased, Nick. And I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan. I grew up in Atlanta until the 3rd grade when Michael Vick was playing quarterback there. So I like to see the Falcons do well. 28-3 still hurts my heart whenever I hear those numbers together. Michael Penix Jr. at 8. Phillip Dukes is also from Atlanta. He is the mayor of Atlanta in my mind, and he was not a fan of the pick. I was a fan of the pick. Because for me, if you get the quarterback really, really right, I'm looking at Pat Mahomes, looking at Tom Brady, like you can win Super Bowls. And so if Atlanta hits on either Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix Jr., okay, like, hey, we might be winning some real deal hardware here in the near future. And also I think it's worth noting, everyone's talking about how much they paid Kirk Cousins, and that's absolutely true. He got a bag and a half, over $100 million. But let's not pretend that Kirk Cousins is going to be the answer here for like 10 years. Like Kirk Cousins also is like 30-plus and tore his Achilles. He got $100 million, and that's phenomenal, but like let's understand now that there needs to be some afterthought to what life will be like after Kirk Cousins. And if you don't think you're picking in the top 10 anytime soon, go get your quarterback of the future. I understand the pushback. I understand Dallas Turner would have been a great pick there. Go get someone after the quarterback. I'm going to roll with what we're doing there with Penix. I like it. Good draft for the Bills, which is your team.
Yeah.
Did they take someone in the first round, or they trade out of the first round?
Traded out. Keon Coleman was the Bills' first pick. And,
I love that.
Made a little bit of room in dead cap space they got rid of. Last question. There's a lot of good ones. Shout out Dave. Shout out Jan. Come back tomorrow. We'll get to your question. Goat Dog says, do you remember the ESPN high school rivalry specials from back in like 2009? We watched the teams for like Mater Day, St. John Bosco, Glade Central. Do you remember doing that, JD? Was that something you participated in?
I remember that. So I don't think I watched a ton of those games, but I remember, I'm trying to think which games that I saw most vividly in my mind's eye, because they did it for a while, I think. I remember watching guys like Jeff Driscoll when he was coming out and he was committed to Florida, and he was a big deal. Growing up in, I say growing up because I grew up a couple different places, Atlanta and then moved to Southern California, being around Mater Day Servite, which is a massive national rivalry, St. John Bosco, a national powerhouse. I went to Orange Lutheran and got to play those teams when I got to high school. Seeing football at that level with that many college recruits on the field at a time was a really cool introduction into like the world that recruiting is. That was kind of my first taste of it. So I remember those. I'm trying to think of the game that I first saw that I would like point to and say that was my first high school football memory of watching it on a broadcast. I think Orange Lutheran played a team from Ohio at one point in time in the shoe, and that was where I was going to go to high school. So I think I saw them at one point. Bottom line, high school football, whenever it's on early in the year and it's on like ESPNU or it gets an ESPN2 slot, or maybe even ESPN at some point during early in the college football season, in the football season period, that's a lot of fun. So I do remember that. That's good for the heart and soul. Yep. And I love that.
Yeah, the closest I ever got to being televised was a local highlights at the end of the news, JD.
But you were highlighted?
Not me. I had an onside kick that was on there.
Yes,
one
sir.
time.
Yes, sir. Surprise onside. What'd we do?
It was. I had this little trick. I like to just kick a line drive at one of the people, right on, like hugging the line.
I love
Worked a couple of times. The other times it just looked like a really bad squib kick.
Just brushed them off the plate a little bit.
Yeah.
Just saying, hey, back up a little bit, brother. I got a fastball. That takes some real skill. Like, I think that's one of the most slept on elements of this show is how good of a kicker you were.
Kickoff, yes. Field goals, no. I couldn't kick a field goal in game past 40, so.
And now you just dominate the kickball circuit here in
all that
local
matters.
Nashville. That's what I'm saying.
Matters.
Real quick, we feel good about tomorrow?
Dude, we are playing Garrett Bauer, who is in the office.
Wow.
He is pitching for the team I'm playing. He's working over there, so.
sabotage game today.
Yeah, it'll be a banter game for sure.
Wow. That's massive. Well, brother, best of luck. We appreciate you, and we'll get after it same time tomorrow. Sound good?
Yeah, let's see you.
That's the man, Nick Brake. Big game tomorrow. Big game tomorrow. So we'll get some pregame thoughts for him tomorrow before the office match between one of our other employees here in the office at On 3. Hey, we appreciate y'all being tuned in. We are extremely grateful y'all take time out of your busy week, busy day to tune in to this show, The Hard Count. If you're on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed and like the video. If you're watching on podcast, subscribe to the feed, rate, review, all that stuff. It just helps the algorithm. It helps us get the show out to more people. And we appreciate the college football community that y'all have allowed us to cultivate here. It's April, and we just filled like an hour and a half worth of college football talk. We got to do it because y'all are willing to watch, talk about it, and create this community together. So anyways, we love y'all. We appreciate y'all, man. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.